Here's some footage the airlines don't want you to watch. In 2016, as Qatar Airways plane is en route to Doha, Qatar from Istanbul, it accidentally hits a bird in midair. This accidental encounter instantly caused a fire to start in one of the plane's engines. As you can see in these frightening images included the passengers. Such a situation that forced the pilot to turn around and land in emergency in Istanbul, where he landed safely as declared by the company Qatar Airways. After landing, the 298 passengers and 14 crew members disembarked safely. This seemingly harmless incident could have had various serious consequences, as the fire immediately ignited one of the 3 largest companies in the Gulf and thus missed one of the most dramatic accidents in its history. The same accident occurred in 2017 when in mid-flight a plane of the United Airlines to Miami had to make an emergency landing in Chicago after flames broke out in one of its engines. Again, this time, it was a bird strike. May 13, 2018. Travelers at Istanbul Ataturk International Airport witnessed a frightening accident. The airport was the scene of a collision between 2 planes, an Airbus 1330 Asiana and an Airbus A321 of Turkish Airlines. In the space of a few seconds, the Airbus of the Korean company, which was in the direction of the runway, violently collided with the tail of the Airbus of Turkish Airlines, which probably had no reason to be so far from its parking point. As a result, the damage was considerable due to the violent impact. The aircraft's tail section was hit by the A330's wing to the point that it automatically folded back on itself. The plane had to be grounded, and the flight that was to carry the passengers to Seoul was of course cancelled. Fortunately, the accident did not cause any casualties, a staggering scene that has already been seen a few months before in July 2017 when a Scoot Airlines plane collided with a Turkish Airlines plane in the same airport. The Boeing 737-700 of the Kazakh airline, which was to join the de facto international airport in Kazakhstan, was taxiing when it accidentally hit a 777 as it was about to fly to Taipei International Airport. I guess the Turkish airport is a bit of a jinx. If one day you order something from China and you receive your package in pieces, then you should know that it is not necessarily because of the company, but perhaps because of the baggage handler who took care of transferring the packages to the hold. As shown in these images filmed secretly by a passenger, this baggage handler employed in a Chinese company was filmed transferring the cargo of a plane to the hold by throwing violently the packages without taking the trouble to handle them gently. These images must have been very damaging to the employee and certainly made him lose his position within the company. Unfortunately, he is not the only one to do this. Many baggage handlers around the world do not care of the luggage they have to transfer. That's probably why we often get our bags destroyed. In January 2022, an Airbus A318 aircraft that was to fly from Paris to Perpignan experienced serious problems in flight. Indeed, shortly after takeoff from Orly Airport, the right engine of the Air France plane caught fire, prompting the crew to issue the code 7700 to its transponder, synonymous with the distress situation. The fire was caused by engine surging, a phenomenon that occurs when the airflow in an engine is not normal, which prevents it from continuing its thrust. The images are striking. A wing covered in smoke, flames over 2 meters high, flashing lights, and the sound of firecrackers. The situation was alarming. The plane could only continue its flight with the left engine. After a few minutes, the fire stopped and the crew decided to turn back to Orly. Once on the ground, the panicked passengers were taken care of by the emergency services and were put up in a hotel for the night before resuming their flight the next day. It was a mind-blowing scene that was filmed in Bruges, Belgium in July 2022 by passers-by as the 12 o'clock noon sun was in full swing. A passenger plane appeared in the blue sky, seemingly heading straight for the ground. According to the pilot, the plane experienced technical problems during the flight, forcing it to crash anywhere in the city as it came dangerously close to the earth. The pilot managed to deploy his emergency parachute on a road near Bruges and landed on a parking lot. Afterwards, the pilot was able to get out of the aircraft with minor injuries without causing any further damage. It was a true miracle that happened in May 2022 in Florida, USA. While flying from Marche Harbor, Bahamas, the pilot of a Cessna 208 suffered a violent collapse in flight. Seeing him in distress, a passenger with no flight experience threw himself on the controls of the aircraft and managed to contact the control tower. He showed incredible composure even though the situation was really alarming. Although he was an apprentice pilot, he had no notion of piloting and didn't know how to land either. Even worse, he had no idea of his location. Nevertheless, the passenger allowed himself to be guided by the control tower while mastering his fear. He managed to keep the plane nose down while remaining calm. This is how he managed, sometime later, to make an almost perfect landing which stunned everyone. He was able to follow the air traffic controller's instructions carefully as he attempted to land the Cessna at 208 Caravans at the Palm Beach airport. The situation could have turned into a drama, but that was without counting on the incredible courage of this passenger who, let's emphasize, had never flown a plane before. His landing was great, worthy of a professional landing. Now let's move on to the real nightmare experienced by the 282 passengers and 18 crew members of a Boeing 777 aircraft as it took off from India to Dubai on August 3, 2016. During the flight, the aircraft reportedly experienced technical problems that forced it to crash on arrival at Dubai Airport. However, it was only after the crash that the real chaos took place on board the aircraft. As soon as it landed, a plume of smoke broke out and invaded the cabin, while a man shouted at them to leave everything and evacuate the cabin as soon as possible. Not listening to him, the passengers still preferred to grab their belongings before going down the slides. Fortunately, despite the panic and chaos that followed the crash, no deaths were reported, except that 13 passengers were slightly injured after the passengers were evacuated. The fire would have started from one of the engines to consume the plane. Immediately, the emergency services were dispatched to control the fire, but a firefighter lost his life during the rescue operations. It took 16 hours of intense firefighting before the brave Dubai firefighters were able to bring the fire under control. You are on board a flight. You're very hot. The air conditioning does not work. You want to be served some water, but little problem. The stewardess is not there. What is she doing? Well, we'll tell you right now. She's snoozing. In 2019, passengers on a flight to South Bend, Indiana in the United States were intrigued to see the condition of one of their flight attendants who did nothing but sleep the entire trip. A passenger even fastened her seatbelt after noticing that she had not done so during takeoff. The world turned upside down. In reality, the stewardess was not ill or unwell. She was simply completely drunk. Julianne Marsh, an employee of Air Wisconsin, had probably had one too many drinks before boarding the plane. If the passengers found it funny, the employers were not happy about this incredible situation. On the contrary, they charged her with public drunkenness and reckless endangerment when she underwent a telomere test. It was revealed that Mrs. Marsh had a 0.204 grams of alcohol per liter of blood, well above the 0.04 limit tolerated by her employers. Julianne LaMarche admitted to having only 2 shots of vodka before starting work. That's all. A confession that will unfortunately cost her place in the Air Wisconsin company. So, there's plenty of time to sleep now. And what would you have done if you were on a plane and while watching the takeoff through the window, you noticed that one of the plane's wheels had come off? Passengers of a Canadian company, Jazz Aviation, flying from Montreal to Sagani, Quebec, had this frightening experience during a trip and had a good scare. While taking off from the Montreal airport, the plane lost one of its landing gear wheels. The captain was forced to turn the plane around and return to Montreal, where he landed safely. Fortunately, the pilots were able to control the aircraft thanks to their special training for situations like this. To reassure you, the situation was not as catastrophic as it might have seemed, since the aircraft in question, a Dash 8-300, has 6 wheels, 2 per landing gear. In case one of them breaks, the remaining one should be able to support the loads during the landing. Well, that's in theory. Anyway, more fear than harm for the 49 passengers who were finally dispatched to another plane so that they could finally take their flight. You are comfortably seated on board a plane when suddenly you notice that where you are sitting, a rather large crack appears on the plane. The feeling is excruciating, I grant you. Nobody would like to be in your place, even if it is near the window. Well, as you can see, that's what happened on an American Airlines flight from San Francisco to Dallas, USA. During the flight, some passengers noticed that the Boeing 757 had a growing crack in the cabin wall. Those can be clearly seen in these images. One of the passengers said he first felt the fuselage violently shaken as the plane took off, and then took a picture of the crack to send to his wife so she would know what happened in case of a crash. Witnesses also reported a noise coming from the plane's fuselage. A few minutes later, the captain decided to turn back due to a pressurization problem. Even though the aircraft was cracking, the cabin had not been dusted, worn, and the oxygen masks had not been deployed. This, a priori, did not alarm more than the 184 passengers. However, the pilot made an emergency landing to avoid any disaster. the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration immediately opened an investigation to determine the origin of the problem. Imagine working as a custom officer at the airport, and while inspecting the luggage of one of the travelers, you come across a human skull. What would your reaction be? That's exactly what happened to Indore in the Indian state of Madhya Pradesh. A woman resident of Jain district was arrested by the police after a human skull was found in her luggage. Indeed, when the latter went through the scanner, the security personnel was, because he discovered inside. The woman was allowed to leave after she recorded her statement. It turned out that she was in fact a religious leader, that the skull was that of his late guru, and that she wanted to immerse herself in Hari, with others remain in the Ganges. Although released, the woman was prevented from boarding the plane at Davis High Albi Alkars Indoor Airport bound for Delhi, as she had no authorization to carry human skull or other remains of a corpse on a flight. Suffice it to say that the security personnel saw everything with this traveler. Now tell us in the comments what you think of this incredible footage. Are you afraid to fly now that you've seen all this? Don't forget to subscribe and click here to watch another of our videos.